firstly thank India Foundation for having invited me to address this gathering. And it's a pleasure to be with all of you and in this lovely city. It's a very vast topic, industry and commerce, and it's India 2.0, rebooting for the meta era. And as speakers, when we were invited here, we were generally given the broad set of issues that we should address when we are doing this 10-15-minute talk. And I refer to the last question. The last question which is given to us, what could horribly go wrong, not just in India, but for the global economy in the next 25 years? And I'll quote the example which happened yesterday. My flight landed at 3 a.m. It should have landed at 11. That was because of a terrible storm in Delhi yesterday, because of which half the flights in the evening after 7 o'clock didn't land or take off. Well, you could attribute it to climate change. And I can say, Delhi has been seeing temperatures of 49 degrees. You've had a problem with the wheat crop in northwestern part of India. So if actually whatever we project in the next 25 years, if there are things that can go wrong, this is going to be one. So, and it just struck my mind. Here I am going to talk to all of you on this topic. And they said, what can go wrong? And one of the threats on the horizon, if we don't address it, is climate change. And I'm very happy that our government is actually quite committed to addressing this problem. We are talking about this agenda, about rebooting to the meta era. We were trying to look at what India is going to be like 25 years from now. It's actually very opportune, because I think that's exactly what the Prime Minister is also thinking. He's making the entire political class, the entire government, and the entire country and the people work on a vision and a strategy and a roadmap to actually delineate what India should be 25 years from now, not just an aspirational goal, but a goal which we will go ahead and achieve. And I think, in a way, this conference and things like this feed into that general thought process. And this is such a mega exercise that's going on that it'll be amazing if actually one day somebody actually writes about it. Because it's an intense discussion, debate going on between ministers, members of parliament, bureaucrats, public, industry associations. So I think it's a vast exercise. So I'll just try to address it in a thematic way. I'll actually talk about where India is going to be, or what we hope India will be 25 years from now. That's the meta era we are talking about. What are the global trends that are going to be relevant to us for these 25 years? Or what should actually guide our thinking? What will our workplaces look like in this coming years, coming decades? What's going to happen to supply chains in the coming years? What's going to be the impact of technology, not only on our business models, but what can be the unintended consequences of technology we should be careful about? And of course, the last question, which is what can go wrong in spite of our best efforts, and what we should be alert to. As Minister before me has said, he talked about a 5 trillion economy in a couple of years, which is quite nearby actually. We are already $3 trillion. We just crossed that a month ago or so. And we are already, just in the top 5. All projections say that by 2047, which is 100 years from our independence, India will be anywhere between $30 to $40 trillion in real terms, not nominal terms. That's something which is actually unimaginable. When we sit around a table and try to get a handle on that number, $30 trillion is more than any economy today in the world. That's something which I personally believe is incomprehensible to most people. This is something which, great thinkers, strategists, etc., particularly those who do scenario planning, can visualize. But it's actually to get it ingrained into our thinking, and we face it. When we try to project something 25 years, we end up with schemes. Schemes are for 3 years, 5 years. It's going to be a top economy. We'll be probably the second, if not the first, or the largest economy in the world at that time, 25 years from now. And I say that with confidence. If we stick to the path, we stick to the high growth path, which we are all working for, we'll be there. We'll be a top manufacturing nation, with about $10 trillion coming out of manufacturing. We'll be a top trading nation, with about $10 trillion of exports actually from India. 10 trillion? This year we were all, crying from the rooftops that we did about $421 billion of goods and about $250 billion of services. That's $670 billion. That's a record. We have broken out of a $500 billion barrier which we were stuck with for the last 10 years or so. But 600 billion on one side, and we're talking of 10 trillion. 20 years from now. Are we actually geared to do all that? So these are the things that are going on in people's minds. I think there are going to be plans on restructuring government, rebooting the government, in fact, actually building it up from scratch, from zero line, and build the whole structure. Because whatever we see as institutional designs and architecture today was designed 50 years ago, 60 years ago with tinkering at the edges. We need new structures, new organizations, new methods of working, new rules, new regulations, if we have to be a country of that size. And I think every Indian, every person who's involved in this country and its welfare should start thinking in those directions. What are the big trends that are going to affect industry and commerce? And I'll try to actually restrict myself to that. One we saw just now, which was, COVID. It has changed the way we work. Work from home has become a norm. Companies are finding it difficult to push employees back into work. So actually people are talking about 20%, 30% employees by rotation, 2 days a week, this is the kind of stuff. And from that has emerged this huge thing, and I just saw a demonstration outside. You're going to have virtual platforms, people are working on Zoom. I mean, government always loved meetings because it also meant travel. I mean, it just got out. We are all doing VCs now, and now it's become a habit. You are rarely called for real meetings, physical meetings. And virtual has become real now, and efficiency has increased. You do 6 meetings a day rather than just, 1 or 2 a week. So that's the kind of efficiency that has come into government decision making. The other thing which is a trend which is happening is technology entering production in a massive way. Be it 3D printing, be it artificial intelligence, and a whole host of ways in which things can be done. And I'll actually explain how these are actually going to be working through the entire economy and the production systems. Climate change is there over the horizon. And I think that's something that's going to be a big, big theme over the next 25 years. And industry and commerce will have to keep thinking about it. We'll have to go for low carbon, no carbon growth, carbon neutral growth, and we'll be talking about clean mobility, we'll be talking about green energy. These are going to be mainstream topics of discussion in boardrooms, in companies, in individual homes. I think that's important. One of the things that has actually come out thanks to COVID is the vulnerability of supply chains. Globalization was the buzzword since the Uruguay round. For the last 30 years, the world was talking, become global, become global, become global. And actually, the world's entire production process. I was told by the Canadian High Commissioner, we're negotiating an FTA with Canada, and the Canadian High Commissioner said that a car that is actually produced either in Detroit or Toronto crosses the US and Canada border 7 times. You make the engine somewhere, it goes across, it's fixed on a chassis, goes back, then you fix the body, then it goes to the other side, then the fittings are fixed. That's it. It's seamless movement. But that's okay between US and Canada. But if you look at computers, they actually go across 8 countries over long distances, China, Taiwan, Vietnam, Malaysia, and a couple of other places, and finally get shipped from Singapore. Now, suddenly COVID has shown the vulnerability of countries and particularly production lines and service sector when you have such integrated global supply chains. Either because of the pandemic or because of restrictive policies of some countries, these supply chains are vulnerable, and I think this is going to be a strong theme in the future. Countries would like to ship production, if not home, to closer to home. Ship production to countries which are friendly, which are partners, which are not going to act inimically in times of trouble. And I think that's come heavily into people's minds. And I think that's very, very important. The other thing that's happening is globalization of services. Actually, COVID was a good time for anybody who did services on the digital mode. Instead of people, outsourcing and work from home, all actually gel very, very strongly. And it's not just foreign companies, but Indian companies also went into that. And I think that's very, very significant because it's going to lead to a cascading effect in more and more sectors. And that leads to the other thing, that as technology is improving, as digitalization is happening around the world and even in India more and more, non-tradables are increasingly become hyper-tradable. And I'm sure you can't have a haircut which is a service across the world, but there could be many, many other services which will be delivered much more than they were in the past. And I think that's going to become a dominant trend in future. The other important thing is we think of services and manufacturing as 2 different activities. Actually, there's a new concept which is going around, which is called servicification of manufacturing. So when you actually buy a product, there are a whole host of services which are embedded in it. The logistics, the marketing, the branding, a whole host of services, financial services are embedded in the final product which you're buying. So actually services and manufacturing are merging as we go along. So this distinction between goods and services is going to be a very, very artificial one. If you liberalize goods, you will end up liberalizing services or will have to do it. So I think that's another trend which we will see. And also, because of what you're seeing currently, the sudden boom in commodity prices, everything, there is going to be an increasing emphasis on the circular economy. things like conservation, reuse, efficiency of use of material, it's going to be a common theme as we go into the future. And last, two other things, and that's something we often forget when we plan, is what is going to happen to the world's population. You just saw the National Family Health Survey, which came out a couple of days ago. India has actually crossed the tipping point. You know, our 2.0 is our, whatever rate it is. And that's less than 2.1, which is the basic rate that is required to sustain the current population. I mean, it's actually happened faster than we think. It's happened because of literacy, it happened because of incomes, it has happened because of employment. So I think the world is very near that point where population will not grow, and many countries, including neighbors, are going to see a population decline. And even in India, I think that's going to be a very important thing come another 20 years. And I think that's something which all industry has to keep in mind as we go forward into the future, because it means two things. You have an aging world. So you won't have young people playing with tech, you will have very old people playing with tech. You know, you will have things done not sitting on the floor, but sitting on things which are actually going to be high because the old people can't sit. So there has to be a changing consumption patterns will happen as populations age. You see what Japan was doing 50 years ago and what they consume now. I'll give you a good example of what aging populations do. So I think that's important. How will this impact workplace? I think that's one of the things I was asked to address, and I thought I'll do that. Firstly, they are going to become increasingly unrecognizable. You know, my department, I'm Commerce Secretary, we run the SCZs across the country. Bangalore has tons of them. The biggest problem that developers are having tasted blood. The units there who are actually happy doing work from home don't want to send their employees back in, which basically means the demand for real estate is going to fall. You know, companies are going to live with 1/3 or 1/4 of the real estate they needed in the past. These trends are going to accelerate. Maybe the current guys can be forced to go back, but new guys will say, hey, I only need 1/3, square foot area, which I needed a year ago or so. I think that's important. They're going to be extremely important is distributed locations of manufacturing. Thanks to 3D printing, thanks to the way technology is going to disrupt manufacturing. You know, how did we go? Long ago, we made one shoe by a cobbler for an individual, very customized. We have moved from that, thanks to Henry Ford and Taylor, into mass production. I think we are going to go back because of distributed production to heavily customized and heavily industrialized production. So, each individual can order a suit which will be tailored to him virtually from a mass retailer, and it will come to you. You'll actually buy a car in which every component you will select and somebody will assemble it in some location, it will get to you. So it's not just going to be just in time, it's going to be just for you. And more important, it will be just from a location near you, because people are going to bring manufacturing closer home. I think that's there. Simultaneously, workplaces also will have to adjust to older workforces. I think that's very important. And they will also have to adjust to older customers. And when you look at that, you keep wondering, why are industries there as clusters? You go to pharma, it'll be either Gujarat or Hyderabad. You go to IT, it'll be Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, Pune, Noida. Clustering has its advantages. But as you have more and more digital stuff getting into real life, the need for clustering physically will also vanish. You'll end up with virtual clusters. I mean, that's the kind of demonstration I see. When you actually look 25 years from now, do people need to be physically clustered? Would rural-urban migration need to happen? These are the kind of things that industry will actually look at, and I'm going to bet my last rupee on it. Smart entrepreneurs are going to take advantage of these trends. Old companies with a lot of fixed assets, with their own investments in fixed locations, will be beaten to the finishing line by younger, smarter, nimbler people who will spread out their workforce, spread out their manufacturing locations, and take advantage of lower costs. I read that yesterday in the paper somewhere, in the flight, that companies are actually recruiting from tier 2, tier 3 cities, and those employees are quite happy to work from there. Employee costs are about a half. The employees actually have a lower living cost. So I think all these trends are going to affect how workplaces look like. What will happen to supply chains? Manufacturing will move closer to your home base. And countries, as a matter of policy, will try to reduce dependence on foreign suppliers or non-friendly suppliers for critical items. I mean, my next speaker is going to be from the United States. The government is investing more in semiconductor chip manufacture in the United States. India is doing the same, and we all know the reason why. And it's going to be more and more. We're going to have shorter supply chains, more efficient supply chains. And while global value chains are going to be a major part of the world economy, they already are, global value chains will actually slightly morph into value chains between partners and friends. And so who is the person who is a part of the value chain is going to become more important. And in that, what my previous speaker, the minister, said, FTAs are going to play a major role. FTAs are not going to be between countries which have ideological issues, which have fundamental challenges. They are going to be between countries who actually have both, A, complementary economies so that you can partner well, and 2, countries whom you can trust. And I think trust is the underlying. And that's what has been missing in the multilateral system. And I think that's very important. And what will also happen in value chains is, in supply chains, is a lot of redundancy will be built in for emergencies. Countries can't live. I mean, take the container shortage, which I think, I came to Bangalore in August, everybody was crying about container problem. You know, Bangalore is a big place for what? Gherkin exports, about 2,000 crores. They all had a problem with containers. So I think, what's the problem? There are only 4 shipping companies which control the entire container traffic in the world. I think the world will end up building redundancies in this kind of stuff. And the last thing here is that MSMEs, small manufacturers, small service providers, thanks to technology, in 25 years, are going to become globally supplying their goods and services. I think technology will enable that. I still remember long ago, a small leather coat maker in Dharavi selling 2 to 3 pieces at a time through eBay across the world. Was it possible 20 years ago? You didn't know the guy. I think that's going to happen more and more as we become more literal, as there is more penetration of digital. Business models have to change as we go along. And what will happen is, there'll be much larger capital flows, both ways. Please understand that if you're going to be a $30 trillion economy, India is going to be a big outward investor, not just an inward investor. I'm currently negotiating an FTA with the UK, which will conclude by 31st of August to be signed by Diwali. India is the second biggest source of FDI in the United Kingdom. I didn't realize it till I actually read the data 6 months ago. We are the second biggest source. So, we have actually reversed the East India Company. We have 500,000 employees in the United Kingdom employed by Indian entrepreneurs who have factories there or services there. So I think this is going to be a phenomenon. It's not there'll be no FDI coming to India, but it's going to be two-way. There'll be a mobile population. It will not be just Indians chasing H-1B visas. There'll be a lot of people chasing Indian visas to come and work in India also. I think we should welcome that, because that's the partnership of equals. Work from home, virtual platforms, they're all going to affect the business models which companies have. And the issue of scale also becomes a question. Well, scale looks good today in manufacturing. 25 years from now, if you have distributed manufacturing, 3D manufacturing, do you need large scale at one location? Maybe you spread it out in 20 small locations. These are the kind of questions that technology is going to pose to business models. And it is absolutely important that green values, that is eco-friendly values, get integrated into whatever we are doing as we go along. Even in services, and in Bangalore is big, even when I negotiate FTAs, we call mode 1, 2, 3, 4 in services. Mode 1 is, delivery across borders. That's your BPO stuff. Mode 2 is your consumption abroad, that is tourism. Mode 3 is business establishment, that I open an office in your country and deliver it. And mode 4 is people going, that's your H-1B visas. We are actually de-emphasizing mode 4. Mode 4 will happen based on countries' needs for more manpower. Whether we get access to visas through a treaty with Australia, there are going to be 100,000 Indians going to Australia because they need them. We don't need a visa agreement with UK. Nurses will keep going to UK. But mode 1, 2, 3 is the way in which businesses will evolve. Indian firms will have to learn over the next 20 years to deliver more and more services by opening offices abroad, by actually delivering things across the border. It'll be supplied from India, it'll be served from India, and also served in India. So, you'll have multiple modes of doing services. I think that's important. Coming to the last two parts, what are the unintended consequences of technology? It's nice to be gung-ho about technology, but let me tell you, everything has a flip side. And the flip side, when we go, and 25 years is a very long time. I mean, think of the poor rickshaw wallahs. I'm sure Bangalore would have rickshaws about 50 or 60 years ago. they don't exist. I think a municipality bans them, and even if you allow them, they will not exist because they can't compete with that auto rickshaw wala. But something else will actually, eliminate the auto rickshaw wala 20 years from now. That's going to be the importance of technology. What will happen is as more and more new products come up, new ways of doing things come up, it will cannibalize existing product, it will cannibalize existing services. So somebody's success is somebody else's loss. The total gain will be more than the total loss, but that's how economies grow. And I think we have to realize that cannibalization will happen of a lot of existing products, industries. Secondly, skills will become redundant. What was useful yesterday will be useless tomorrow. Factories and buildings which have been built, a lot of them can go waste. I mean, you can go to large part. Where the gold rush in the United States, new cities and towns came, and when that ended, 150 years ago, you have empty towns there, ghost towns. I think that's going to be there. And the demand for a lot of things which are greatly in demand today may vanish. Demand for steel may come down. Demand for cement may come down. There may be new ways of doing this. So that's where I land. And 3 points. What can things go wrong dramatically is what I was asked. One was climate change, which I mentioned. It can lead to unknown consequences. Pandemics. COVID taught us that 2 years ago. I'm hearing about monkeypox. People who read the newspapers read that. The other is the world breaking up into silos. You're seeing what's happening, in some parts of the world right now, and leading consequently to trade wars and sanctions. So these are the unknowns which can disrupt. But the bottom line, whatever happens, I'm very positive on the country. I completely echo what the minister said. India was 25% of the world GDP for almost 2,000 years. That's our rightful place. We are on track. If we maintain it, we'll reach there. Thank you.